Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, from where you may be joining in the world. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar, proudly brought to you by LivePerson and Deloitte. Today we'll be discussing everything generative AI and talking about some of the AI labs that we put into place for some of our customers, and really discussing how these leading brands are testing and deploying generative AI in their contact centers. We've probably around 12 to 18 months on the journey around generative AI globally. Obviously, with the emergence of ChatGPT and large language models, and businesses looking at how they can really start to capitalize on Gen AI within their organizations. I'm safe to say that the hype is likely over now, and businesses are looking down now to implement and get some of their Gen AI activities into production. We can talk to you a little bit about some of the approaches that our customers have taken to do so. I am joined today by some great experts from Deloitte and from the LivePerson team. I'm joined by Claire, who is the digital contact center partner. I'm also joined by Michael O'Toole, head of CX and AI for the contact center. And I myself am Kevin Warden. I'm the director of solutions consulting and strategy. Both Claire and Michael will be talking today, and we'll run through the agenda very shortly. But I am also joined by Simon from Deloitte. Simon is our digital contact center lead. Also joined by Paul Brandes, our lead strategist from LivePerson, who will be answering your questions in the chat. So on the right-hand side, you can see there is a chat module as well as a Q&A module. If you have any questions, please pop them in there, and we will do our best to answer them throughout the webinar. And we'll also have some time at the end for a bit of a Q&A session where we can talk to the panel of experts. In terms of what we're going to be covering today, we're going to set the scene a little bit to talk around generative AI in the contact center. What are some of the key trends that we're seeing? Where are businesses on their journey? I'll then hand over to Claire to talk about the state of generative AI and really the challenge at hand. What are the objectives that we're trying to solve, but what are some of the challenges that our businesses are facing as they go on this journey? We'll then be handing over to Michael, who will take us through some of the approaches that we took around these Gen AI labs and how they supported some of our customers' business goals. And we'll hear from some success stories from some top brands who have already embarked on this journey. So as I said before, generative AI, 12 to 18 months old. There's been a lot of hype in the media. There's been a lot of hype in many businesses. I think it's the trending topic of all webinars and all conferences that you've probably attended. But we know that businesses have been in a state of flux for a while now. Generative AI is certainly disrupting many different industries, many different organizations. But disruption has been around for a long time. We've gone through a digital transformation journey. We've had, blockchain introduced to organizations. We've been talking about cloud computing, machine learning, the Internet of Things. I think mobile, and being mobile first was the top of the list for many, CIOs and CTOs in the past. So, this is just another evolution, but certainly for the good, and certainly revolutionizing the way that we can engage with our customers and make our staff, more efficient. There's probably a lot of terminology that's thrown around as well as part of this kind of this evolution. I want to kind of touch on two things that we might be mentioning today. Large language models and generative AI, and it's probably good to take these away and have a good understanding of them. So when you are talking about generative AI in your organization, you're doing that with with some knowledge. So large language models, really, it's a deep learning algorithm that can recognize, can summarize, can predict and generate content based on really the knowledge that you feed it and the knowledge gained from massive data sets. And we saw some of those earlier models, trained off of, millions of data sets, from the internet. And generative AI, which we'll be talking about primarily today, is really a broader term which references the artificial intelligence technology that is then capable of generating text or generating images or video and audio. And we're seeing this ever evolving, as some of the big providers are constantly updating some of their large language models. So those are the two things that we'll be generally talking about today: large language models and generative AI. In terms of the revolution of customer experience and how we're seeing it certainly revolutionize CX for our customers, it probably falls into kind of three key areas or three key pillars. The first one's around turning your agents into being kind of superhuman. So those contact center agents, your frontline staff, giving them the ability to really have more powerful and engaging conversations, with your customers. So we're seeing this in a number of different areas. The ability to look at a, transcript that could be, multiple turns, it could be quite an extensive conversation that someone might be having with a customer, and being able to summarize those conversations. So when it does get passed on to another agent, or maybe it goes from a bot to a human, we can probably see that summary of that conversation. We're also seeing it used to be able to construct replies. So the ability to access a knowledge base, access the correct answer, and help an agent craft the best response for that customer. And we're now seeing it using having the ability to rewrite. And I'm sure many of you have probably used ChatGPT to rewrite an email or rewrite a document. What we're seeing now is the ability to, rewrite based on, could be branding. It could be the things that you don't want an agent to say, the things that you want to make sure that an agent does say, and those kind of rewriting capabilities. We're also seeing it revolutionizing the way that bots and automation is built. We're certainly seeing now the ability for generative AI bots to gather information from a customer and do that, conversationally. We're seeing them able to now respond to kind of FAQs and more of an autopilot fashion. So holding the conversation end to end, particularly around, frequently asked questions and anything that might revolve around some knowledge. And also the ability now to properly understand what the customer is saying and route them in the appropriate manner, route them to the right agent or the right, agent group to be able to handle their conversation moving forward. And we're also seeing it in this conversational intelligence space as well. The ability to, post a conversation, do some QA around, that conversation, look at the voice and messaging data and interrogate that data and get some key insights. So maybe do a simple prompt like, are my agents gaming the system, or tell me the top 5 complaints from the last 2 weeks. The ability to use generative AI to really interrogate your data. And what we're seeing is a kind of an emerging trend here now as well is that real-time detection. And we have kind of generative AI in the loop to monitor our conversations in real time to give us some key insights that we might be able to, potentially flag a conversation with a customer or flag a conversation with a manager moving forward. The other things we're seeing is certainly around kind of, generative AI trends. So there's a few trends that we're seeing within organizations today. Certainly organizations are looking at generative AI to increase operational efficiency. So how can we make our agents and our staff just generally more productive? That could be, in analyzing data. It could be in holding conversations with customers. We're also seeing organizations use generative AI to accelerate the time to value. We can build bots now within a matter of hours rather than weeks and months. So what took us, a very extensive amount of time to build out, really complex, flows with, more dialogue style bots. We can now have, action-orientated bots or task-orientated bots or FAQ bots that can really handle the conversation end to end and can potentially handle some of those curly questions that a customer might put in front of a bot. And certainly with generative AI, we're now seeing an improved customer experience. So the ability to handle more natural conversations and not necessarily get stuck down a pathway where the consumer or the customer gets stuck, maybe talking to a bot, for example, with no way of, getting out of that flow. We're certainly seeing the ability now to have more natural conversations with the customer. But we do know that businesses are still nervous, and hence the webinar today. Many businesses are still in the testing phases, really determining the value of generative AI to the organization and understanding, trying to understand how to bring Gen AI to production. And certainly we've looked at a bit of a framework, and these labs certainly help us, do that. We are talking a lot today about, AI and, what our customer expectations are. We do see AI as one of the fundamental layers of being able to engage with your customers effectively, but there are others, in there in terms of messaging foundations, messaging operations, and just generally some other kind of AI and automation capabilities there as well. Please do feel free to scan the QR code on the screen here today. We've done a bit of an analysis of the state of the customer, through 2024 and beyond in terms of particularly around AI, the expectations that brands are putting around AI, and the expectations that customers have around AI as well. And then we have seen a bit of an emerging AI gap where 91% of business leaders are certainly feeling positive about the future of AI for customer engagement, but potentially the consumers and your customers maybe not being there in their and in their positivity and their sentiment around that as well. So feel free to scan that. There's a lot of golden nuggets in terms of that report. But what we do know is that AI is one part of it. And if we think about how organizations are revolutionizing the way that they talk to their customers, certainly how they look at those digital conversations, it goes beyond AI. It's those messaging foundations, the ability to understand the customer's intent, their key contact drivers, the ability to connect to your customers through different channels, whether that's your website or through your mobile app or through a third party or social media channel. And certainly looking at ways that once you do connect to a human, how can you best assist your agents, your frontline staff, to have the best conversations possible, connecting to your systems, into your CRM, CDPs, ticket management, for example, to have the best and most productive conversations moving forward. And then how do you automate? Certainly generative AI does help in this automation space, but how can you not only have customer facing bots, but potentially automate some of those interactions for your agents? The ability to hand over from a human to a bot, or from a bot to a human, or a bot to a bot, is certainly what we're seeing moving forward. So the art of being conversational around understanding your customers, connecting them in those right channels, assisting your agents where it's necessary, and automating those conversations to obviously boost customer experience, but also boost those cost savings as well. And so we partnered with Deloitte around helping our customers really understand the value of AI and understand the value of generative AI. So we chose to partner with Australia's leading digital consultancy, really to help our customers understand the value of AI and how to bring that to the organization. In terms of the two parties in the webinar today, Deloitte is really drawing from their creative and technical depth of being Australia's largest digital consultancy, with a really rich history of helping organizations deliver innovation and digitize their contact centers, and really that ability to tap into some of their global lessons and the success that they've had through their Deloitte AI Institute. And we think it's a perfect partnership. As LivePerson has 3 decades of experience of really connecting brands to their customers through being conversational, and really combining our track record in helping brands set that expectation and exceed customer service excellence. And obviously we're continuing to push the boundaries here, particularly around AI and generative AI. And we couldn't think of a more perfect partner to go on the journey with us. I'm going to hand over now to Claire to kind of take us through their thoughts and Deloitte's thoughts around generative AI. What are those challenges? What are those opportunities ahead for many organizations? So I'd like to welcome to the stage Claire.
Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate it. And thank you very much to LivePerson for inviting myself and my colleagues to be part of this webinar. It's great to be here. As Kevin mentioned at the start, I am joined by a couple of colleagues. You'll be hearing from Michael O'Toole, but we have a leader around contact center transformation on the call as well, Simon Stefanoff. So please feel free to keep Simon busy and post some questions in the chat box, because we're here to help as well. We are seeing definitely across contact center a big shift towards a digital first approach, not only because there's a recognition of that's what customers are demanding, change is coming, but there's also a big trend in terms of empowering our contact center agents and also our customers to be self-serving themselves with any questions, inquiries that they have, or really thinking through what's the next best action I need to take here. And as much as there's a lot of focus around Gen AI, it's not all about Gen AI. There is a lot of work and conversations and proof of concepts we have been doing with clients to better understand how they can leverage those models that Kevin's been talking about, from the large language models, etc. But there's also a lot of conversation around ensuring that contact center is elevating the career model, with that being very often the first point of contact that customers might often have with a brand, as we're seeing a number of branches shut on the high street, from banks to shops, and also other virtual services emerge within healthcare as well, another sector. So as we've looked at the emerging view of Gen AI, we've actually conducted a global research of really interviewing over 2,500 leaders to get a better understanding of what's their view and their perspective around Gen AI. what are some of the investments that they're making? And you can see from this research, we're sharing some of the data points here. So 62% of businesses and tech leaders are feeling really excited about Gen AI. However, less than half of those, 41%, are prepared to address what the Gen AI related talent concerns are as well. So there is a focus around Gen AI. There's a natural interest. There's an investment that organizations are making, but there is some support that those organizations need to understand where is the best return on investment? How do I start? How do I engage my teams in actually understanding what's available within Gen AI, and also what's available in the investments and the choices we've already made into strategic technology platforms that we have in our organization. And those decisions and those investments now will inform the future and the pace of change around Gen AI. As we've talked with clients who are looking at Gen AI, and specifically within the contact center, we have seen that they're looking to solve a number of factors across the contact center as well. So how do I increase my speed to market? How am I getting to my customers faster? How can Gen AI help me in terms of elevating the expertise of my agents when helping with customers? How am I creating more value so that we can scale up and ensure that all of those customer interactions are of high value as well? Where do I demonstrate effective savings? So where do I first invest around Gen AI capabilities to demonstrate a return on investment so I can keep injecting savings, keep looking at experimentation and adding more use cases into the contact center as we move towards a digital first engagement model as well? Customers also asking, how do I maintain my competitive edge? So how can the capabilities within messaging moving towards a digital first enabled chat and messaging system really help me ensure that I am being increasingly competitive, that I'm also elevating the brand that I have and ensuring that we are the preferred choice of customers as well. Also grappling with that question, what do I build? What should I be customizing versus what's available? And that's also really challenging, given the speed of technology and the speed at which we've seen Gen AI come into the market and customers use Gen AI capabilities. Then what we know today might be very different to what we know and what's available to us in 6 months' time. I also mentioned talent. It's not all about Gen AI. Within contact center, the role of the agent and looking at an invested career model is becoming more increasingly important for organizations as well. So how do we leverage Gen AI to invest in our people and reinvent how they might work? It's not about, as I said, replacing agents. What we are seeing, and I'll come to this next as well across a number of sectors, is really how you're leveraging those capabilities as a co-pilot as well. So I said that we have looked across a number of different sectors, and I just wanted to share some of those insights with you that we've seen across a spectrum of those sectors. A common one you will see around use cases is actually AI helping to be a co-pilot for the agent. So it's becoming the call center's agent's virtual assistant in terms of finding the right information that's going to help the customer who's reached out in their moment of need. They have a query, or take a banking scenario as well. You've perhaps got a vulnerable customer or a health scenario where someone is calling and they're in their moment of need and it's quite a stressful situation. So how can you leverage the Gen AI capabilities in terms of getting a better understanding of what the customer is calling for and how can I best solve the customer's need right now based on what it is that they're looking for support for? So you'll see that the agent co-piloting is actually a common scenario that's popped up across a number of different sectors. But then we've also seen some sector-specific case studies. So take telco and tech, for example. That use case of looking at how we can really reduce the number of abandoned carts and look at proactive messaging as well. So you can see when someone is hovering over the website actually searching and looking for a product. They want to interact with the brand. They're in the shopping cart at the moment. How can you actually come to them in their moment of need or a query that they have and help them solve for that so that they continue throughout the transaction to reduce the number of abandoned carts as well? Or even from a health perspective, we've spoken to clients in the health sector who are also looking at how can I ensure that I am giving the right advice to clients, and we're doing some spot check of QA. So where we might have nurses who are listening into a number of conversations, that total call might take 40 minutes. But the actual time spent giving the customer and the consumer specific advice around what they're calling for might be 10 minutes. So how can you actually get to the specific point of that conversation and actually analyze it and ensure that they are given the correct advice and guidance for their health need that they have? And then you can move to financial services. We know that there's a lot of regulation which the banks are focused on as well in terms of providing the right advice, looking at vulnerable customers. So how are we leveraging the large language models available, the capabilities that you can access within LivePerson to ensure that the agent's got the right support to provide the right advice and guidance to vulnerable customers? Looking at tone of language that's used, any words, the semantics, sentiment analysis as well. So we are seeing some trends, as you can see, that are very sector specific. And then when we move as well to look at what are some of the particular use cases that are emerging. So I've shared some of those use cases that are sector specific, but some really popular ones are focused around quality and customer experience, efficiency, and also sales. So when we look at quality and customer experience, not only is it the agent co-piloting that we've mentioned already, but how can we look at a post-transaction quality assurance? How can we help with call summarization? Have we actually provided the right advice and guidance to the customer? Or do we need to go back and look at how we can provide additional learning materials or guidance to our agents so that they are actually getting to the heart of the matter as well? Where might there be some in-the-moment compliance flagging that we want to raise to the agent as well? From an efficiency perspective, there's a number of use cases and examples there as well that are really looking at increasing the breadth of micro automations as well. So where can we look at some of the abandoned cart that I mentioned, the co-pilot we have as well, but some of the semantics and sentiment analysis. So how can we tell that from the tone of voice that a customer has or the language that they're using, actually, that this is a customer who's about to leave, who's frustrated with the service that they have? There may be a risk to losing them and stepping away from the brand. How might we actually look at perhaps offering something that's a little bit unique? Or how do we actually understand now is not the right time to be upselling to that customer? Now is the right time to really help them resolve the query or concern that they have. And we would come back to maybe look at an upselling opportunity later, which leads on to sales as well. Sales being very important in terms of not only how we're retaining our customers, how we're increasing and embedding enhanced customer loyalty, but how might we uplift sales? And we spoke earlier some of the sector examples given from a telco perspective, but it can span across a number of sectors as well. So when we know customers are actually on the website, they're looking to complete a transaction with the brand. Do they need some specific help? Is there a customer who's actually bought something, but actually there is that opportunity to provide some assisted sales and increase that conversion to them as well? So I've shared there a few examples we've seen across sectors who are really looking at how they can leverage the Gen AI capabilities and leveraging a digital first approach within their contact center. However, there are many customers that while they are open to embracing the generative AI world, looking at capabilities, they're also struggling with how to begin, where to get started, how far should I go? What about the risks, given this is something that's fairly new? And this is an approach we've been invested in, and really working with clients to look at a experimentation approach where we can actually understand what are some of the priority use cases that are going to have most impact to you within your call center, and also how might we help your agents get on board with some of those changes that are coming through. So with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Michael O'Toole, who will talk to you a little bit about our approach of experimentation that we've been taking with a number of clients.
I'm Michael O'Toole. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me here. So I'm a service designer, and I specialize in design experiences that are powered by AI. And in particular, I've been embracing the contact center lately as a business area on the forefront of embracing AI and using it to deliver value to brands. So as Claire mentioned, what we're seeing from the market at the moment is people recognizing that AI will change the way that organizations and brands work. Where there is some gray area is exactly where can we deliver value now in a safe way. And with that background, that's why we think this approach of experimentation, an approach we've been using for years when it comes to nascent emerging tech, is right for organizations. While they're still landed on the big hitting questions of what the exact future is for their organization in light of the AI revolution, where can value be proven now, and where can the people we work with who are largely bought in to the sort of value of generative AI, how can we prove that value so that they can bring others in the organization on board? So that led us to our approach around experimentation, which can be broken into these 4 phases. Now, I'm going to talk to you today about the first 2 because we've actually brought them together in a generative AI lab approach that we run, and that is the discover and POC phase. But broadly speaking, in discovery, we take known use cases for AI or generative AI, in the case that we're talking about today, based on the industry that our client may be in. And we sort of work with the organization themselves to work out where these use cases will deliver greatest value, where are they aligned to their operational, their strategic direction. And we sort of go through the process of co-designing those in a very sacrificial high-level concept phase firstly. How do we prove their value? And then we sort of progress a subset of those onto the POC phase, which is really coming to a technical proof of concept. We make sure that technical proof of concept is scalable when the organization does want to deploy it in market. The goal really is to definitively prove value before that operation investment is made. And then, of course, having done that discovery phase, we then have a backlog of opportunities which can go through that cycle in the future and can be brought into market and scaled. But I'll deep dive on the discovery and POC phase in this chat today. And that takes us to about 6 to 10 weeks, depending on the breadth of scope that we're covering. So in the discover phase, we're really client challenge focused. So we do start with a list of industry use cases. We have a function at Deloitte, the AI Institute, who have identified where greatest value from AI is, and also not just where greatest value is, but where are some safe areas of value, where some more emergent ones that we might want to take a experimentation approach in. We then sort of work with the organization, work with those that are using it, those agents, to refine those into something that really helps them in their job. As Claire mentioned before, we're in a phase at the moment where the business cycle of 3 years, 4 years doesn't really accommodate for really fundamental change right now in AI. And it's probably too soon to know exactly how best to embrace AI for most organizations. Most people are resigned to the fact that it will fundamentally change the way organizations work, but delivering value now is the challenge. And the second point of difference that we have is we're extremely human-centered. So as was mentioned before, the barrier to technical entry for doing some really profound things with AI is becoming lower and lower, especially when it comes to just experimenting. So we think the point of difference here is it being a human-centered problem, making sure that those that are using the tech or experiencing it, that it works for them and it feels authentic to them and it empowers them. And then the second phase, as part of these labs that we run, is around the POC. So having gone from this long list of opportunities, having worked on them, progressing them into concepts, putting those concepts in front of customers and agents, we then prioritize them based on value, and then we develop it into a technical proof of concept. Now, the technical proof of concept does a couple of things. Firstly, it's a technical proof that shows what we're trying to do is possible, that it is scalable. But secondly, it gives us a chance to actually run a controlled experiment to prove the value of them. I've just noticed I'm not on video, am I, as well? So apologies all. I'll just switch my my camera as well. Oh, no, it's not working. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Yes, so that's the point of the POC. And then the example I'll talk to you about today, it was a very emergent area. So the exact value that we delivered was very unknown. There's not many existing models that say, hey, this is, we can deliver you 20% more efficiency by using these tools, or we can lead to 20% more penetration in terms of your upsell or conversion rates. So the art here is proving it through a controlled study and having that as an input into a business case for delivery. I think one of the interesting things to think about is the kind of generative AI opportunities we're seeing in contact centers. I think Claire did touch on a few of them before, but because it's sort of one of the more interesting areas, I'll go through a few of them now. So as I mentioned before, the phase we're in is around augmenting people. The appetite for complete operational overhaul is limited. There's still too much uncertainty. So we're thinking about things like quality control. So how can we help our agents uplift the quality that goes out, not write it for them, not suggest a response, but how can we take what they would otherwise say and improve it for tone of voice in terms of what the brand, to align with the tone of voice of the brand, or in terms of things like grammar, accuracy, and making sure that what is being said is safe and doesn't expose the brand to risk. So that's sort of where we're seeing the greatest gains at the moment. There's other things I mentioned before: regulatory compliance, auditing. That is a large use of labor at the moment, and a great area for generative AI to deliver gains. We're seeing stuff to do with sentiment analysis, understanding the context that the customer comes in with. So previously, where we might have linked up to a customer 360 profile to really understand the customer, we can now understand a lot from what the customer has said. So I guess the bulk of the technical complexity in delivering personalized experiences in messaging often is getting the right data sources and integrating them. If we can shortcut that and deliver 80% of the context by just understanding what has been said in the conversation history, that's what we do. And sometimes the result is commensurate with what we might expect from really integrating across the technical ecosystem. There's stuff that sort of overlaps with quality and efficiency around fraud and threat detection. How can we augment our agents in the moment to flag any sort of risks that might arise? How can we surface knowledge, not just your traditional way of grabbing the right article, giving it to the agent, and then suggesting that they present it to the customer, but how can it be contextually served up in a way that is just, yes, look, the agent can look at what has been presented, agree with it, and present it in a tone that matches with how the conversation's been progressing so far. And of course, the idea of warm transfers. So, and this is something we're seeing not just in contact centers, but also in retail stores. How can we really quickly give the agent accepting the customer a snapshot of why that customer's there, and prime them for things like pre-sales moments. In terms of efficiency, we're seeing customers interested in inbound routing. So there's sort of a trend recently, I suppose, to have a common front line rather than a deeply skill-based front line. Well, now with really clever generative routing, and I know LivePerson has some features designed around this, we can actually re-explore that model of really understanding what the customer is asking and pointing them in the right direction. What's progressed recently is this idea of really railroading them onto a particular intent has matured. Generative AI can understand understand the nuance around that intent, but also if the customer's asking about a couple of things and can serialize the way that customer's dealt with. Interaction summaries have been a thing for a while, but they're getting much better. The idea of summarizing what was said in the conversation, but also incorporating the broader context of that conversation for notes that can be consumed by case managers or picked up next time. When we're thinking about asynchronous chats or chats where a customer might come back after a period of time and resume it, that conversation being the back pocket of the new agent is all important. We've talked a bit about the chatbots and virtual assistants. There are a bunch of ways to micro-automate certain simple transactions, and I think the breadth of that is growing now that some of these things are generative AI powered. Sales is another interesting area that I think really generative AI unlocks in a way that some of your traditional AI hasn't. So the idea of presenting offers and targeting the right people in the moment with those offers, and actually serving up the sales opportunity to that agent in a way that makes sense in the context of the customer interaction. A lot of maybe your offshore agents may not get the exact tone right of trying to sell within a service interaction. So presenting that A in the right moment and B linking it contextually to what's being discussed are the big gains that we're seeing. So in terms of how the project itself works, we start from those domains that I just spoke about then, deep dive into some of those. There's often reasons why we might want to explore a particular area or leave one aside. A reason to leave one aside might be that there's other transformational change going on there and we're better wait until that is underway, or it might be that there's a particular business problem that needs to be solved. An example might be, I mentioned before, offshoring your contact center, making sure that the quality of those interactions is commensurate with what the brand has been delivering previously. A different problem might be moving into a new domain. We're seeing that with some of our TMT clients, broadening the scope of the service they offer and being able to speed up that speed of competency around servicing those new product sets. So the whole idea is we start from that long list. We then prioritize, test those in a lo-fi format. We then can add sort of design features as part of that lo-fi format, and then we take a subset of those into the POC stage. And when we say POC and experimentation, we're talking about week on week, we're doing something new, fundamentally different, putting that in front of customers and testing it. The kind of results that we're delivering, as Kevin mentioned, that we might do across a month before, we're now doing in the space of a day or hours. And because of that, we can really be quite experimental. We go down avenues we don't know whether they'll deliver a value or not, and we might waste half a day exploring that, but come to something else that does deliver value. And that's kind of the art of the experimentation approach. It's something that wasn't really possible with previous prior to this idea of generative AI-based solutions. I'm going to talk to you about one particular success story, which was with a major Australian telco. We've done this lab approach across sort of 6 to 10 weeks with a few different industries now, but the one I'll go into today is with a telco. And this is the solution there. So we called it the quality control panel. It was designed to solve the telco's biggest issues, which was basically massive periodic peaks in demand. It was a largely offshore contact center that didn't quite pick up on the nuances, the local nuances in terms of language. There was a spate of sort of selling before service, and there was not really anything to do with the brand voice coming through. You didn't really know that it was uniquely this telco speaking to you. So the quality control panel essentially did a few different things. Probably the headline feature was basically a rewrite. So an agent would type in what they would otherwise say, and then there would be a response from the bot that would say, look, say it this way instead. It would draw from the style guide from that organization and not only say what to say, but say why it was changed. And that kind of continuous uplifting was really important, especially with contact centers with a transient workforce. Did a few other things as well. It gave a customer snapshot. So based on what was being said, it had a bit of an emoji saying this is how the customer's feeling. It flagged whether the customer was a churn risk or TIO risk. Now we compared this, TIO being the industry ombudsman. So we compared these risks, this risk flagging to traditional models, and it scored particularly well. And this was only after a week of innovation. It was outscoring these traditional models. That can sort of show you the power of what we're talking about here. And the other thing is whispers that would come through the LivePerson platform. So basically cues as to what to say and what was going on, explicit cues to the agent. Now the proof's always in the pudding, and this is kind of the results that we saw. And again, only a period of sort of 4 weeks discovery, 4 weeks of POCs. We saw a 30%, 25% point NPS uplift. We saw an increase in CSAT. Importantly, we saw an efficiency gain of 0.5 conversations per hour, and we saw a massive grammatical accuracy increase. I think it's important to note 0.5 conversations per logged in hour may not seem huge, but this is with agents using this for the first time in a controlled environment with some quite complex inquiries. So we would presume that after a period of really getting fast with the or really getting tuned to what this technology does, that would be massively increased. I think we've got some verbatims here. Yes. So what we found was the customers that we tested with found that it led to much clearer communications, found that it provided more relevant responses. The base response was essentially the same, but it felt more relevant to the customer. And those responses that it did generate were more helpful and friendlier in tone. And for the agent themselves, they really felt empowered by it. They could much quicker come to a suggested response and have it sense checked. I think it's important to say that some of these agents are using generative AI anyway. They're just not doing it through the chat platform. So they're going to another window using generative AI tools to do this anyway. This just serves it so much better, and it's much better than an open solution, which they would have to sort of take away any PPI information before they enter it there, and it also wouldn't do the other things we're talking about, such as alignment to the brand voice and give you suggestions on why a change was made. The response was, yes, much more accurate, and the accuracy was much higher. We tested this in a single-blind controlled study. So basically, some agents were augmented by this tool and others weren't, and that's where we saw the results you saw before. So I think I'm handing it back to you, Kev, but that's our project in a nutshell and our approach.
Excellent, thank you, Michael. That was great to see, and I think certainly what we've found is there's many different use cases, there's many different approaches. Organizations are kind of testing this behind the scenes as well. But what I like is that you've linked it back, particularly with that telco use case, to the key business objectives, all those challenges you're trying to solve, and then gone through that kind of prioritization process, getting the feedback actually from agents, getting the feedback from the leaders and the decision makers within the organization, taking that through to a proof of concept and showing the results of that proof of concept. And I think that's an approach that anyone on the call here can take. And certainly, what we found is that, that partnership with Deloitte, it reduces that kind of risk as well. So many of our customers have said, let's partner together with a leading consultancy to really make sure that this is, there's a formal process to be able to do this. And sometimes it's really good to have that kind of consultative nature as part of the process. So thank you, Michael. That's great. In terms of it's great to see some of the successes, particularly with that telco brand that you mentioned before. Others on the call, you're probably thinking, what are the other successes that, we're starting to see? As I said, we've been doing this probably properly in production for around 9 to 12 months now, and we're starting to see some successes and some metrics that we can share. So just a few here that'll kind of pop on the screen. So we worked with the top 5 European telco. We've actually looked at real-time kind of recommended responses, powered by their knowledge that they've got. So kind of the co-piloting capability that we're talking about before. We've seen around a 7-minute decrease in the conversation duration and a 5-point increase in NPS. Some other results that I've seen as well is, potentially up to 10 to 11 minutes. And if you're having, hundreds of thousands of conversations a year, or maybe even every single month, you can start to see the time savings and the cost efficiencies there. From decreasing the conversation duration. We've also worked with the top 10 US credit union who looked at just kind of summarization. That's a fairly low risk way to get started. So how can I summarize a conversation using generative AI? We've seen around a 25% decrease in that initial response time. There's agents being able to look at that summary. If it's transferred from one agent to another or a bot to an agent, take that summary, view that summary, and move forward with the conversation with that customer. We always know that we'd love to keep that customer with that same agent every single time, but we do know that there's transfers or the next day conversation can happen. They've also seen around a 20% decrease in the average response time there as well. And then we've spoken about summarization. We've spoken about more of a co-piloting experience, but then we've also had a large B2B SaaS company actually go fully into autopilot mode. So having, using the knowledge base, their developer center, and creating a autopilot Gen AI bot, which can handle FAQs and knowledge. And they've seen about a 30% increase in the deflection rate. Certainly when they looked at, how could they potentially design a bot that's more of like a dialogue, flow style bot versus a Gen AI bot, about a 50% faster time to deployment. And they've seen about a 70% increase in the NPS over that previous bot engagement, where potentially those customers were getting stuck down into a dead end pathway with a bot. So just a few examples there as well. As I said, and you probably saw from those use cases there before, it's really that low risk approach. Maybe thinking about how to use generative AI behind the scenes for things like summarization, maybe to rewrite a response, potentially to give an agent a response to give to a customer, then start to think of those use cases that can be customer facing, maybe particularly around some FAQ style bots or knowledge bots, or using generative AI to go and collect a specific set of data, from a customer. Now, we do have a lot of questions coming in, which has been fantastic. And thank you to Simon and Paul, who have been answering the questions as we go. You're making our life a whole lot easier. What I will say before we kind of get to the Q&A, please continue to put more questions in there. Please do scan this QR code if you're interested in continuing the conversation, and certainly having a conversation around the approaches that we've shared today, those different use cases, and hopefully we've taken giving you some information you can take back to your organizations there as well. So a few different questions coming up in the Q&A, and I'll kind of pick on a few. Some have already been answered, but I'd love to kind of elaborate more on them. One really good question came in about kind of how does Gen AI help with the regulatory compliance and auditing? And I think, Michael, Claire, we've probably seen this in a few, if I can invite you back to stage, I've probably seen this in a few of the requirements that are coming up from customers. I certainly see it as the ability to look at transcripts and analyze them. Is there mention on ombudsman? Is there maybe mention of financial hardship, or mention of maybe a sensitive conversation? Are you seeing this, Claire and Michael, in terms of the other customers that you're talking to around this regulatory compliance and auditing using Gen AI for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the industries we work with are highly regulated, and the good thing about regulations are they're quite explicit. So you can sort of reference the regulation and then compare it to what's been said in the chat, and flag when there might be things that are in breach of those. And I think the design art there is around the level of sensitivity. Do you want to sort of over flag and just say, hey, look, there's a conversation here that could be a risk of breaching this, or do you want to sort of go the other way and perhaps miss some? So I think that's the art of it all. But yeah, essentially it's looking at, especially when it comes to new regulations coming in. So in the telco space in Australia, there's some new regulations coming in around like people in vulnerable situations, and helping agents get really up to speed on that quickly and know when they might be potentially in breach of those.
Just echoing what Michael has said, and you're talking about the core summarization, the flags, but also reinforcing this doesn't replace the audit that organization will need to do and in compliance with the regulation that's been stipulated, but it does help to audit it and track. and be proactive in terms of taking any action that needs to be taken if you're finding that there's a trend here and there is further training and education that we need to provide our agents, because we can clearly see from a review of the transcripts that there's a gap and there might be some incorrect advice that's being given, or some improved advice that we can give as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Michael. I did see a really good question that just came in. We obviously talk about Gen AI and disrupting the workforce. So, what are our views around that in terms of, are we looking at reducing the number of agents as a result of implementing AI? Is it more complementary? What trends are you seeing in that space?
We're certainly seeing at the moment it's complementary. It is that co-pilot. Because at the same time as looking at how we can streamline the work that's coming through to the agents, ultimately, as I mentioned, we're working with customers who are taking a digital first approach. Clients and customers are demanding it. I'm sure all of us who are on this call have got a number of examples we can point towards where our expectation is, I just want to be able to speak to someone at a time that's relevant to me, through a channel that's preferred to me as well. So very often it might be that the first point of call a customer has is actually through the contact center. We're not going into our local bank branch in a way that we used to. We're not going to sit with a mortgage advisor to help us with our mortgage application. We're perhaps completing a large percentage of that online. But I do want to call and speak to someone from my bank as I complete this application to just get some assurance that it's correct. A mortgage application is certainly one of the biggest things each of us can go through as well. So in terms of contacting the agent, it's still there, but I think the questions and the queries are becoming a lot more complex. So what we're looking to do is actually ease the load of the agent and give them the capacity to deal with some of those more complex queries that are coming through from customers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Claire. Sorry, you go, Michael.
I was going to say, it's also, yes, the complexity is one angle, and the second angle is about freeing up, automating those very transactional processes and the diagnosis process of what the customer's calling about, really augmenting or automating those processes up front and at the end, and focus on that empathetic middle, which is the most meaningful part of that interaction, where the customer can have that quality time with the agent, and improving that quality, freeing up that time to enable that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And just probably echoing that, there's not many customers that come into us and saying, hey, I want to decrease the headcount by X percentage. It's more, I want to make those agents just more productive. And I think, Claire and Michael, you both touched on, saving those really high value, maybe more complicated conversations for the agent. Use Gen AI, use automation to be able to handle, maybe those kind of mundane, repeatable tasks, as well. I think, some great answers there. Thank you. Another one that we've got in here is more around, how does generative AI enhance kind of chatbots? And I think it's interesting, right? I think we spoke throughout this presentation about that, faster time to value. Potentially, I worked with just recently a global telco, 88 million customers. They've been on the journey around creative, more kind of dialogue style bots. When you kind of step a customer through a process or through some FAQs. They spent about 2 years creating around 152 different kind of intent-based kind of bots. Gen AI is revolutionizing the way that they're thinking of this, moving forward. So I think a couple of spaces that, we are seeing certainly around, training phrases. So using generative AI to maybe, help with those training phrases of some of those traditional bots. Having generative AI for certain tasks. So we recently worked with a higher education organization where they have student advisors, and these student advisors will gather some information from the student to then recommend a course, and a lot of that is digital, a lot of that is kind of self-service. They have a Gen AI bot now to really help answer, grab a few of the answers from the student, maybe have some course recommendations and send it across to a human student advisor. And what we've actually seen is some of those conversations are handled better than some of their student advisors. This is what we've heard from that organization, is that generally those conversations are better, and we can actually use some of those conversations maybe to train up our student advisors, the humans, rather than the other way around where we're normally using exemplary human conversations to train bots. So I think that's quite interesting. So the ability to maybe, have a specific task. And we do see a space still for those kind of NLU dialogue style bots, but maybe hand overing to a Gen AI bot, or having a bot brought into a conversation to handle certain FAQs or certain tasks, there as well. Michael, I might pass to you. What are your thoughts around, those typical kind of chat bots? How does Gen AI kind of change that landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's Gen AI, I guess, increasingly sort of a fallback option for where those previously narrow use cases might have failed. Just I guess to echo what was being said throughout this presentation, it is largely about augmenting people, giving them the power, making them feel empowered to deliver those right experiences. It is not in the same way as those traditional micro automations might have been to take something away. We don't see much of Gen AI taking that stuff away at the moment. It's really just enriching the experience. So the theme's different. I guess we will see the next phase, in the next few years, of Gen AI based complete automations in the same way we have for traditional AI. But yeah, it's just about supporting agents first to deliver great experiences.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And probably one last question, and I'll throw it back to you, to both of you. But there's a few questions around kind of hallucination detection and guardrails, and maybe I'll kind of talk to it from a LivePerson perspective. Absolutely, this is really, really important. We've seen many examples of hallucination out in the public domain. You've seen reporters maybe trying to do some prompt abuse to certain bots to get them to do anything from, talking badly about Mark Zuckerberg, or potentially, I think I saw one giving away a vehicle for $1, from a car dealership. So that certainly is out there. It's a big consideration. Building in those hallucination detection guardrails has been a number one priority for us. Looking at things like prompt abuse as well, so not letting customers abuse these kind of bots. And then, certainly looking at how, if you do have a fully automated kind of customer-facing bot, potentially looking at how stringent you want it to be. So how factual do you want it to be, or how creative do you want it to be? In that example of that kind of student advisor, it's probably halfway in the middle. We want it to be able to be as factual as possible around courses you can potentially provide to that student, but let it go outside the boundaries a little bit. And when I was, testing it, for example, I was asking about what's the highest paid, marketing degree or highest paid marketing job that I could go after, and letting it go outside the boundary just a little bit, still with those kind of guardrails. Let it answer to me that it wasn't all about how much money you make. It's also about how passionate you are about your job and things like that as well. So I think that's quite interesting in terms of those guardrails. What other, Claire, Michael, what other kind of guardrails can you think about? I think the approach that you've done, as with these AI Labs, is certainly a guardrail in itself in terms of the approach to generative AI in these organizations. Any other closing comments around, risk avoidance and guardrails?
Well, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of the experiments at the moment and use cases being an agent co-pilot use case, as opposed to something that is made available live on a website, on an app, etc. So there is some nervousness. There are those stories that you've shared. I've heard some as well in terms of hallucinations. But I believe that with the Gen AI capability, the investment going into this, the pace of change, it will get there, because the large language models are going to get even more mature, even more accurate. But while it's still fairly new, that is why a lot of the use cases are necessarily those agent co-pilot ones and internal. So the agent can actually act as a first point of call to verify, is this actually the right advice I should be proposing based on what's being suggested to me, or should we take a different step there as well? They are really prompts there for the agent to make the advice and guidance being given to customers, the next best action, etc., more accurate. But there will be some circumstances, given, we've pointed to some examples where that might not be.
Yeah, the agents definitely saw that barrier for those, risk of hallucination. I think it does behoove anyone working with generative AI to make sure that what the solution is much better than the agents not being augmented by generative AI. So what we have done with the experimentation approach is prove the model over a large volume and breadth of inquiries and prove that the hallucination is extremely low or not at all. And even if it was to happen, you do have that barrier there. But that is a key risk, and that's definitely why we're in the augment, not automate phase.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Claire. There was some great answers there. We are at time. It's as you said, those guardrails are certainly around the approach that you take. From linking it back to business value, consulting. Making sure it's visible in the organisation. From maybe the approach you take from a back of house. The co-piloting, summarization. Rewriting capability. And certainly the approach that you've taken around being consultative, and then more of the technology front, the actual embedded kind of guardrails that you might have in tech to be able to help you there as well, that kind of all work in unison. Hopefully that's been a very valuable session for all of those who have joined us. Thank you so much for joining us, whether that's your afternoon, your evening, or your morning. We will make sure that this webinar is shared and the appropriate links shared there as well. I'd love to thank Claire, Michael, and behind the scenes, Simon and Paul, for a very valuable webinar. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. And thank you for joining us.